What does it mean to innovate? What does it mean to come to an existing genre and reimagine it? To, as Raymond Chandler says, exceed the limits of a formula without destroying it. Frank Miller's Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, does just that. It comes to the existing formula of Batman and breaks through its framework just as this bat breaks through the grid of these window panes. In this, Frank Miller, the second figure in the 1986 trifecta and one far different than the first, Art Spiegelman, also fundamentally shifted comics. I want to suggest that by analyzing Mr. Miller's approach, we can come to some realization of how innovation works. The lesson is that of literary history. Miller does not simply smash the Batman franchise to pieces. Instead, he recreates it from within its own terms. This is innovation, not as absolute originality, but as renovation. Realizing this, we can better understand how genre fiction works. Born in 1957 in Maryland, Frank Miller grew up in Vermont and worked his way into the New York City comic scene, eventually taking over the Daredevil title with issue 158 in 1979, where he was announced as newcomer Lanky Frank Miller. He recast the series as a crime drama, as we can see on this cover, echoing the Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry police movie series. From there, Miller developed Ronin, a futuristic series that gave him much more creative control and allowed him to explore manga and bande dessinée techniques. He returned to Marvel then, writing for Daredevil, while David Mazzucchelli took on the artwork. They created the Born Again story arc, a brutal story of drug addiction, betrayal, and desperation. From there, DC asked Miller to take on the Batman franchise, for which he produced The Dark Knight Returns in 4 separate issues. Before we turn to that book in depth, I would like to make 3 brief points about Miller's bibliography. First, Miller followed on The Dark Knight Returns with Batman Year 1, which was again drawn by Mazzucchelli. This is a great Batman story, a straight telling of his very first year. It is far different from The Dark Knight Returns, but truly excellent. Mazzucchelli is one of the few comic illustrators to work both in mainstream and high art comics, and his story Asterios Pala is wonderful, though far different from Batman. Second, from The Dark Knight Returns, Miller became a major figure in comics, developing his own projects such as Sin City, 300, and Holy Terror. From there, he has developed significant Hollywood celebrity, working as a producer and sharing director credits with Roberto Rodriguez on Sin City. If Art Spiegelman brought an underground comic sensibility to the New Yorker magazine and so shifted comics more to American literary culture, Frank Miller revitalized superhero comics and moved them closer to mainstream entertainment culture. The Dark Knight Returns is a significant work, and it announces its significance on its very first page. I've got the home stretch all to myself. When the readings stop making sense, I switch to manual. Bruce, this is Carol. You're going too fast. But the computer crosses its own circuits and refuses to let go. I coax it. It isn't programmed to... Bruce! Bruce, you son of a... It shoves hot needles in my face and tries to make me blind. I'm in charge now, and I like it. Then the front end lurches all wrong. I know what's coming. I've got just under 2 seconds to shut this mess down and forfeit the race. The engine, angry, argues the point with me. The finish line is close. It roars. Too close. The left front tire decides to turn all on its own. I laugh at it and jerk the steering wheel to the right. The nose digs up a chunk of macadam. I look at it. Then straight into the eye of the sun. This would be a good death, but not good enough. Spectacular finish to the Newman elimination as the Ferris 6000 pinwheeled across the finish line. A flaming coffin for Bruce Wayne. Or so everyone thought. It turns out the millionaire bailed out at the last second, suffered only superficial burns. Lola? Thanks, Bill. I'm surprised Anyone can even think of sports in this weather, right, Dave? Three elements stand out here. First, by now Miller's basic layout is clearly recognizable as a 4x4 grid, an old-school approach to the comics page. This grid has a tremendous density. It's 16 small panels so tight on the action that it is hard for the reader to realize what is going on. In this, Miller creates a visual contradiction, packing the page with images so the reader is forced to slow down as his or her eye examines each picture, all the while suggesting that the action is moving tremendously quickly, the car is breaking out of control and tumbling to its ruin. This is called decompression. It is a manga technique of visually slowing down the plot by inserting panels, and it creates a paradox of speeding up the action by visually slowing it down. The last tier of the grid, however, announces a change. The first panel of this tier gives us Wayne's face, the first time we really get a good look at him, engulfed in flames, and the second panel buys us some breathing room by changing the shape so as to appear in the shape of a cathode ray tube television. This is an agon with television, a struggle with the forms of comics and TV. And comics appear to have lost, to have gone up in flames, replaced by the TV news. Second, Miller pays some attention to his language. The writing smacks of the hard-boiled fatalism of Pulp Fiction. This would be a good death, Bruce Wayne reflects, but not good enough. And the action of Wayne wrestling with the crippled car, forcing it to do his bidding, echoes Raymond Chandler's notion of heroism, that justice will not out, as Chandler says, unless some very determined individual makes it his business to see that justice is done. More! Pinwheeling in Ferris 6000, the language looks ahead to the Ferris wheel later in Book 3. The Heart of the Sun looks ahead to Superman's fate in Book 4, and Newman Elimination seems a strange reference to Paul Newman, actor and Playboy race car driver, and New Man seems a pun, perhaps a foil to the good death Wayne imagines. A number of things stand out here. The technical virtuosity, the allegiance to hard-boiled crime fiction, and the theme of rebirth. What stands out overall, though, is that Miller is announcing his intentions from the first page, death or rebirth, and so Wayne escapes the fiery coffin to become, over the course of The Dark Knight Returns, a new man, a new Batman. To understand how Miller accomplishes this rebirth, we have to step back. For by the time Miller came to Batman, the hero had already been through a series of rebirths. During the late 60s, Batman, as with many superhero comics, had fallen from popularity. DC was on the verge of canceling his series and decided in 1964 to relaunch him. As with The Flash, Julius Schwartz was the editor-in-charge, and with Detective Comics 327, written by John Broome and drawn by Carmine Infantino, Batman received a new insignia with the black bat enclosed on a yellow field. And a commitment was made to move Batman stories from space aliens and ray guns back into Gotham's world of crime. Schwartz even cast Batman using a gun, a decision that was quickly abandoned. At the same time, however, Hugh Hefner's Playboy Club in Chicago was screening old Batman television shows. One thing led to another, and ABC acquired the rights to Batman and created the 1966 Batman TV show, produced by William Dozier and starring Adam West, Burt Ward, and various guests, such as Bruce Lee, Burgess Meredith, Cesar Romero, Julie Newmar, Eartha Kitt, and Lee Merriweather. This was followed by a movie. Inspired by the Playboy Club, the show was filled with sexual innuendo and made much of the utter silliness of a grown man running around Gotham City with an adolescent sidekick in swim trunks. It parodied Batman. Parody is a Greek term for a burlesque poem or a song. It satirized the franchise with a straight face but a knowing twinkle in its eye. Indeed, it took the show further than parody, to camp, an exaggerated and effective, self-consciously mocking style. The show set a trap for Batman from which he could not escape, try though he might. So the 1970s brought another relaunch, this time written by Denny O'Neil and drawn by Neil Adams, whose art imagined Batman with a new level of darkness and of detail. Here is the cover of the first issue of this relaunch, The Secret of the Waiting Graves, Detective Comics 395 of January 1970. Adam draws a muscular and lithe Batman in his unmistakable naturalist style. Naturalism is an artistic style following Romanticism and emphasizing detail and realism. Following Romanticism, it expressed a turn away from stylized forms. O'Neil and Adams also produced a Green Arrow, Green Lantern series from 1970 to 1972, which took on political concerns by imagining these two heroes traveling the country in a pickup truck. It casts Green Lantern, member of the intergalactic police force that he is, as a social conservative, continually schooled by the more liberal Green Arrow in the complexities of American society. Following The Amazing Spider-Man of May 1971, Green Lantern Green Arrow turned to drug abuse in its summer 1971 issue, in which Green Arrow's ward, Speedy, is discovered addicted to heroin. Regardless of the darkness and the seriousness O'Neil and Adams brought to Batman, the puffy Batman and prepubescent Robin figure flanking the masthead at the top of The Secret of Waiting Graves write Batman's fate as the burlesque fun continued, rerun after rerun, on TV. If we examine Frank Miller's trajectory in The Dark Knight Returns, we can see him working with this literary history. Batman's first appearance in The Dark Knight Returns is much in the Neil Adams mode. He leaps from the sky in a magnificent splash page. This should be agony. I should be a mass of aching muscle, broken, spent, unable to move. And were I an older man, I surely would. But I'm a man of 30, of 20 again. The rain on my chest is a baptism. I'm born again. Wild animal growls, snarls, werewolf, surely, monster, like with fangs and wings, and it could fly. Reality check, Michelle. Talk about composure, totally lack of. He's a man, about 12 feet tall. Bruce Wayne travels back to 30 to 20. So The Dark Knight Returns introduces Batman in a Neil Adams mode, and then literally blasts the new-look yellow icon off his chest. As the comic continues, Miller draws an increasingly sadistic Batman, one who returns to a pre-60s look of the bat insignia and finally breaks the Batman code entirely by taking up a machine gun and finishing the job. By the fourth book of The Dark Knight Returns, Adams' naturalism is entirely gone. Instead, Batman and Superman are truly cartoonish characters, bloated and oversized, in what is called a Bigfoot style, a style of cartoon art characterized by bold, expressive lines, a lack of distracting detail, and humorous exaggeration of bodily features, such as noses and feet. The best example of Bigfoot is, of course, that sailor with the biggest feet of all, Popeye. Generations of Batman writers and illustrators had tried to save Batman from parody by making him more and more realistic, adding crime stories and taut muscles to save him from a comic book reality. Yet all of these approaches attempt to deny the absurdity of the premise by insisting that such a hero could be possible, that a visual realism would hit at the truth of Batman. So they attempt to create him as realistic in the face of his utter unrealism, fighting a never-ending stream of villains who always lose but are never defeated. Miller takes a different tack, and the lesson is threefold. First, he innovates Batman by returning to comics history, and so he internalizes the parody into Batman, giving him big feet, and so he makes him more nightmarish, more violent, more angry, and more dangerous than he has ever been before. In doing so, and this is my second point, he shows us that the overtly unreal often allows greater commentary on the real. He shows us a Batman who may be a hero, but who is the worse for it, who is filled with pain and bitterness, who is ready for a good death. This brings me to my third point. Miller's renovation of the Batman story created a lasting change. It not only inspired Tim Burton's Batman movie in 1989, the first of the stream of Batman movies that have brought Batman back to the forefront of American culture and finally done away with the campy parody, but it also moved his comic reality into the world of serious art. The original artwork to this cover, cover number 2, sold at auction on July 2nd, 2013, for $478,000. Not the highest ever paid for a comic book cover, and perhaps not in the financial world of high art, but certainly a significant amount. So I argue that Miller pushes the generic formula of Batman not simply by being more original in his approach to realism, but by returning Batman to comics. He recalls that refinement is not the only road that art can travel, and that originality, at times, comes in the shape of recovery of the past, rather than a break from it.